Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a real pleasure for me to be here in Brussels as we've just completed a fruitful summit here in Brussels. I'd like to thank Prime Minister Michel because he's always welcomed us. I'd like to thank the Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, because he always supported us in this important alliance. He did visit us in Ottawa this spring, and we had a very good discussion because Canada has been a long-standing member of NATO. As a founding member of this organization, Canada showed constant and determined leadership, defending our world common values like democracy, peace, and security. We know that to promote these values, we need to keep modern military forces well-equipped.
Canada unveiled a comprehensive, ambitious, once-in-a-generation defense policy. We announced significant new funding to upgrade our military and ensure that Canadians in uniform have the tools they need to serve our country effectively and efficiently. This new policy represents an increase of more than 70% of our defense budget and marks a reversal of years of decline and, frankly, neglect. We are taking the right approach and making the right investments for Canada. Make no mistake, Canada's armed forces will now have the capability to be even more active beyond our own borders, maintaining a visible presence in regions around the world and expanding our leadership within NATO. In recent years, we've been active in Latvia and the Mediterranean and Baltic Sea, working with our allies to maintain the integrity of our international land, water, and air. Just a few days ago, during my visit to Latvia, I was pleased to announce that Canada's commitment to Operation Reassurance has been renewed for an additional 4 years. We'll be increasing and expanding the Canadian presence in the region through further air surveillance, policing, and training. We're proud to take a leadership role in international defense and security because we believe in the principles on which NATO was founded. And as we reaffirm our commitment to NATO, I announced yesterday that Canada will be assuming command of the NATO training mission in Iraq for its first year. Our role will be one of institution building, helping to create the foundations for longer-term peace and stability, improve governance, and professionalize the Iraqi security forces. Au moment où nous réaffirmons
As we are reaffirming our commitment vis-à-vis NATO, I announced yesterday that Canada will assume the command of the Iraqi training mission of NATO during the first year. Our role there will be to reinforce the institutions and to contribute to lay the foundations for long-term stability and peace, on top of improving governance and professionalizing the Iraqi security forces.
Top-down efforts to train senior Iraqi military personnel will be training the trainers, so to speak. We will also be building up Iraqi capacity and strengthening overall military structure and process. This is the natural next step for Canada, support for Iraq, as we move forward from a successful fight against Daesh, helping Iraq transition into a country of long-lasting peace and security. Canada's commitment to NATO is resolute, and our participation in this alliance is strong. In addition to the renewal of Operation Reassurance and our enhanced role in Iraq, there are a few other areas I'd like to highlight. This past February, our Minister of Defence proudly announced that Canada would be rejoining NATO's Airborne Warning and Control System program. Today, I can announce that Canada will be deploying personnel to this program over the next several years. After stepping away from AWACS under a previous government, I'm pleased that Canada is back and re-engaging in this important NATO effort. Notre pays est fier.
Our country is particularly proud to move towards the new NATO command structure that will be adapted, and we intend to cover all the positions that will be made available to Canada. We are the main contributor here at NATO on peace, women and security, because we know that when women do take part in peaceful missions, then they allow us to glean better results in conflict areas. As you can see, Canada is an active and essential partner within NATO, and we do assume leadership roles on many fronts. Our commitment to this alliance has always grown year after year, and we were right to do so because NATO does reflect the Canadian values and plays a frontful role to maintain international order based on our rules to defend our democracies.
Canada has always pulled its weight. Canada and our allies will judge us based on our unwavering leadership and demonstrated commitment to this organization. The results speak for themselves. Canada consistently steps up when called upon, and we will proudly do so in the years ahead. Once again, thank you all for being here today. I'm happy to take your questions now. Sorry, there's a microphone there, sir.
Prime Minister, thank you for taking our questions. Murray Brewster with CBC. President Trump came out and told us a little while ago that he has convinced allies to an accelerated plan for getting to 2%. You've told us that Canada is not going to increase or double its defense budget. What, if anything, did you agree to in there today?
We are increasing our defense budget. Indeed, we're increasing it by 70% over the next decade. This is something that came about following what, quite frankly, was years of declining investment and underinvestment by a broad number of NATO allies over the past decades, quite frankly, including Canada. In 2014, when NATO came together in Wales to talk about reversing that decline and moving towards stronger increases for everyone, Canada had been also underinvesting and neglecting its military investments. So when we came into office, not only do we stand by the pledges made in Wales, but we also launched a comprehensive defense policy review, consulting with Canadians and experts around the world to come up with the right plan for Canada. And we're very proud of the strong, secured, engaged plan for our defense, which, like I said, increases defense spending by 70% and makes significant investments in capacity, things like 88 new fighter jets, the surface combatant ships, and significant other investments. We continue to recognize how important NATO is, and we'll always step up with cash, yes, but also with commitments and capacity. That's what NATO's looking for.
Prime Minister, just to be clear, though, did you agree to anything new in there today, given what President Trump has said?
The president has been consistent that he wants to see people spending more on defense in their countries, and we are very pleased that we are doing exactly that. Le président a toujours été très clair qu'il voulait.
The president's always been very clear. He insists that NATO member countries should invest more into their defense, and will be doing that, 70% more invested into defense over the next decade. That is what Canada logically needs to do, and it's important for NATO. Good afternoon, Mr. Trudeau. Could you give us more details about your meeting with Mr. Trump yesterday, the contents and the duration of this meeting? Well, it was a short, friendly meeting. We discussed the new president of Mexico and our discussions with him. We discussed NAFTA and our ongoing work to modernize and improve the existing NAFTA agreement.
About the incoming Mexican president, with whom we had both recently had positive conversations, and we also talked about the importance of continuing to work on renegotiating and improving NAFTA, work that we continue to be engaged in.
Juste un petit suivi, est-ce que vous avez abordé la question?
Follow up, please. Did you discuss car industry tariffs? We discussed NAFTA in a general context, not specifically car tariffs.
Here on your answer, you signed a declaration yesterday that said that Canada will commit to the 2% that was agreed upon in 2014. And yet you've also told us that we will not be hitting that 2% within the next decade. Mr. Trump has come out today and said that all allies have agreed to that 2%. So are you now agreeing to the 2% or are you not agreeing to the 2%?
We reaffirmed our commitment in the joint statement to the Wales Declaration, to the Wales agreements. And in Wales, all NATO countries agreed to reverse the cuts and move towards 2%. That is something that we certainly agree with, and that's why we're pleased that based on the consultations we did with Canadians and our own defense policy review, we're moving forward with increasing by 70% our defense investments over the coming decade. Okay. Il faut se souvenir que dans le contexte.
You should remember that in the context of the Wales Agreement, we acknowledged that declining defense spending needed to be stopped and reversed, and that we needed to invest more into our defense. All NATO countries agreed that they needed to do that. Canada agreed to do that. And that is the reason why we reconfirmed the Wales Agreement. And I can also underscore that since 2014, NATO countries have invested an additional $87 billion into their defense. And we will be increasing our own defense spending by 70% over the next decade.
Committed to that 2% target in the declaration yesterday. When will it reach that 2% target?
We are going to continue to make decisions based on how Canada can best contribute to the world, to NATO, how we can meet our own goals for what we're doing, and that's what we did over the past couple of years with our defense policy review, coming up with a strong, secure, engaged plan that increases by 70% our investments in defense over the next 10 years. This is something that is entirely consistent with the commitment we made in Wales, and we will continue to stick with that.
Paul Vieira, Wall Street Journal. What then impression that what did your allies agree to today in their meeting, and was it to get to 2%? Beyond 2% in very short order. Was that your impression, what the allies agreed to with Mr. Trump?
We agreed that it's extremely important to do more in terms of burden sharing, and we highlighted how important it is for all member countries in NATO to increase their defense spending in line with the commitment we made in Wales, and that's exactly what people are going to do. It was a very strong, a very positive meeting where we reinforced the importance of NATO, reinforced the unity of NATO, and reinforced the commitment we have made, certainly encouraged strongly by the President over the past year to continue to invest strongly and continue to increase our investments in our defense capacities and our capabilities.
Just quickly then, on another related topic, after meeting and hearing from Mr. Trump, do you leave Brussels reassured that Mr. Trump will tell Vladimir Putin during their summit that there will be consequences for further Russian interference in Ukraine and other Baltic states? And what did you tell Mr. Trump about this?
I think what was very clear from the conversations in the room, just about in every single session, is that NATO is strong and united on the question of Russia, on the question of Russian interference or any external interference in our democracies, in our alliance, is something that we will not accept. And the message was very clear both to President Trump and actually from President Trump as well. The concerns about Russia, the concerns about threats to the alliance were met with solidarity and unity, and we're looking forward to a good meeting and a productive and constructive meeting between President Putin and President Trump.
En français là-dessus, s'il vous plaît.
Okay. Ça a été très clair au sein de toutes nos rencontres.
Well, it was very clear from all our discussions and meetings that NATO's unity on the issue of Russia is strong. The President and all other heads of state and government were clear that Russia's interference is unacceptable, and we expect the meeting between President Trump and Mr. Putin to be constructive and fruitful. In a document yesterday, you indicated that you were committed to the 2% aim, but you're not prepared to repeat this today. Did you lie to Mr. Trump, or? Well, yesterday we agreed to fulfill our commitment dating back to the 2014 Wales summit. And we can repeat this commitment. We will aim for 2%. It was important because back in 2014, we were in a situation whereby NATO member countries had been reducing their defense spending for decades, including Canada. Under the previous Conservative government, it was important for us to invest again in our armed forces, and that is the reason why we initiated a broad-ranging consultation process with experts and with stakeholders in Canada to determine what our armed forces need and what our men and women in uniform and their families need in terms of investment. It is on the basis of those consultations that it was decided to increase our defense spending by 70% over the next 10 years. And this is in line with and up to our Wales commitment.
In leading up to 2014 and the Wales conference, NATO countries had been underinvesting in their military and declining in their military and defense investments, including, unfortunately, in Canada, where our Conservative government was cutting in military spending. There was a commitment to reverse that declining investments and start moving towards 2%. And that's exactly what we agree with as a government when we came in. We were happy to reaffirm our commitment under the Wales Agreement, and we are happy that we are now investing in the kinds of things that our forces need, that our allies expect of us, increasing in capacity, increasing in capability, increasing in our ability to deliver on commitments, as you've seen with the new commitments today, over the past 2 days, and ultimately increasing by 70% our defense spending over the next decade.
Est-ce que dans votre rencontre avec M. Trump, vous avez obtenu quoi que ce soit, quelconque progrès sur le plan?
When you discussed it with Trump, did you obtain anything when you discussed NAFTA or anything in this meeting with NATO? We actually committed with him to carry on working on the NAFTA one.
No, Canada will not be doubling its defense budget in response to a question about 2024. Is that still true today?
Yes, we are increasing by 70% over the next decade our defense investments.
But not doubling the budget, and yet Donald Trump is saying
70 is not doubling. No,
yet Donald Trump is saying, as you're aware, that all of the allies, NATO allies, and he was asked specifically about Canada today, are going to reach 2%. How do you explain the fact that he seems to think you've committed to this?
We have recommitted to our Wales engagements. The Wales commitment to reverse the decline in spending and increase our spending towards 2%. That's exactly what we are doing. There was a time not so long ago when Canada and other NATO allies were declining in their military investments. Wales was about reversing that and starting the trend in the right direction. And since that day in 2014, we've actually increased by $87 billion our non-U.S. spending on defense. And as I said, Canada is going to continue to increase our defense spending by 70% over the next 10 years, which includes investments in new fighter jets, in new surface combatant ships, in a broad range of the kinds of supports that the women and men of our Canadian forces need.
Last question.
Michael Couture, Global National. So just to be clear, towards 2%, not 2%. So what President Trump said today was wrong.
We committed in the declaration yesterday to the Wales agreement, which, and you can triple check the wording in that, moves us towards 2%, and most importantly, reverses the decline in military spending that happened across NATO allies, including in Canada under the previous government. We are proud that once again Canada is stepping up and investing in our military capacities, our military investments in, I think I've said it, 70% increase in our defense spending over the next 10 years. That's a significant number, and it goes along with the commitment that Canada's made to continue to step up around the world in peacekeeping operations, in NATO operations, consistent with us taking on a leadership role in the new training mission in Iraq for NATO for the first year, which will be helping to set it up and set the way it'll work for many years to come, as well as extending our commitment to Latvia. I was in Latvia just a few days ago, and I got to see not just the extraordinary Canadian soldiers, but the multinational force training alongside Canadians, and the value of this cooperation, this collaboration, not just in effectively standing in readiness against Russian actions or Russian incursion, but the symbol of NATO collaborating at such an integrated level, learning from each other, standing side by side and growing together, is a very, very strong one for the world about NATO unity, certainly a sentiment that was repeated throughout the meetings we had over the courses of yesterday and today.
Just as a follow-up, I wanted to ask you, what is the sentiment amongst NATO allies in that room when President Trump comes in demanding a lot of things, increasing spending to 4%, well beyond what anybody is looking to do? Does it take away from the work that you are trying to do in NATO?
You know what, I'm going to let my allies speak for themselves. Certainly for us, the president has been consistent. There was no surprise in his approach on this. And I think we were all ready to demonstrate and reaffirm our commitment to NATO, not just with increases in cash spending, because what you spend on the military budget doesn't necessarily automatically lead to greater capacity to contribute to NATO's defense. And that's why investments in capabilities, investments in training, investments in actually new equipment are the kinds of things that NATO needs most. And that commitment that, for example, Canada has always shown to be part of every single NATO mission that there's been, always stepping up, and right now stepping up in significant and meaningful ways in leadership roles across NATO, is the kind of thing that we were proud to talk about. The Canadians are always engaged with around the world, and it was a pleasure to be there in the room, standing firm alongside all of our NATO allies. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.